Warren Vander Hill interviewing Dr. Thomas McComish for the Ball State History Project. Dr. McComish is Emeritus Professor of Biology and Director of what he calls ABC, Aquatic, Biology, and Fisheries Center. Certainly an area of the university, as he well knows, near and dear to my heart. This is October 5th, 2004. Tom, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this, to help me out with this project. And I'd like to begin, kind of at the beginning, if you would tell me some things about your educational background, where you're from, where you got your degrees, et cetera, et cetera.
I was born and raised in South Dakota.
Where in South Dakota?
South Dakota is way west of here.
Yeah, I just drove through it, so that's why I'm asking the question. Yeah.
But I was one of 6 children, raised in a very small town, 900 people, and I went to a very, very small school, of course, within that town, and then went on to get my bachelor's and master's at a nearby college called South Dakota State College, now South Dakota State University. My master's was in the professional track for fisheries and wildlife students. Then I went from there to the University of Missouri, where I studied with a preeminent scientist in the area of fisheries biology, and in 1971 received my PhD in zoology/aquatic ecology.
Okay. Then you began your academic career.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Oh, I came to Ball State and interviewed, and had several other interviews, as a matter of fact, and this was in 1968. I selected Ball State because I would be able to teach and do research, and both of those things were goals that I'd had for a long time, and so Ball State fit my needs very closely, and so we came to Ball State, and I was hired to put together the fisheries program, new fisheries program with emphasis on practical kinds of research, applied kinds of research, and so that's how that worked. I might add that when I came to Ball State, the intent of my wife and I was probably never to stay here.
That was my next question.
To use it as a stepping stone. And when I got here, it was so wonderful, and I had so much freedom, and I was doing the things that I really loved, that there was never a thought about going anywhere else, even though I had opportunities along the way. Ball State was just a wonderful place to be.
It kind of bears on a couple of my next questions, but you can sort of pull them all together if you want to. And I guess one specific point, which you touched on a little bit, but when you came here to join the faculty, what were your expectations of what the role, the life of faculty member at Ball State would be like?
Well, expectations, the first expectation was that I would have quite a heavy teaching load, and that it would be rather difficult to do research. However, once I got here, I realized that if I wanted to do some research, which I did, that I would have to seek extramural funding and find ways to get that done. And so I was able to work things around to my way of thinking on it, and once I got started with it, why, it worked out very well. I was able to make a connection with the Indiana Department of Natural Resources very early on. Called them one day, I think it was in the first quarter that I was here in 1968, and asked if I could come down and meet with them. I did, and I told them, I said I was eager to do applied research in Indiana, and did they have anything that would work, that we could work together on? And they said, well, no, but we're glad to know about you, and welcome to Indiana, and so on and so on. Well, 2 months later, they called me and said that one of their biologists had quit up on Lake Michigan, and would I like to finish up writing the report for him? And so I did, all gratis, and And soon after that, why, they started funding me, and they funded the Lake Michigan project from that time on.
Did you ever feel that you were at a disadvantage in your area of expertise because of the presence of Purdue in the state?
You know, Purdue was a long-established institution for research in Indiana, and it's the agricultural science institution. But I would have to say no, and the reason I would say that is that they had a person working in the area of aquatics, but it was toxicology research, and there was no one in the state that was emphasizing applied research or fisheries management, and so there was no competition at all from Purdue. In fact, we were able to do a lot of things that the Department of Natural Resources, just Division of Fish and Wildlife, really liked. And so we were very fortunate in that regard. Even though Purdue was there and they always participated in things and so on, we were able to do things like establish the Aquatic Biology and Fisheries Center at Ball State, the only one that exists in the state as of today.
Yeah.
And this is, this is 2004. So,
would it be fair to say that you came here as a fairly atypical faculty member because of your interest in getting grants?
Yep.
In doing research? I mean, I don't really see that at the time you came here as something that was done by a lot of people in your department or even in the whole university.
Yeah, that's correct. It at times was difficult. I'm sure that it was more difficult before I came than at the time that I came. There was some transition going on. There were some things that were going on. We recently became a university, and of course one of the roles of almost all universities is at least some research, and so there was some emphasis on research, and this was indeed even resented by some faculty, but promoted by others, and having the kind of experience that I'd had studying with someone very eminent in their field, I felt like it was important to do that, and it fit with the establishment of the Aquatic Biology and Fisheries program, because you have to have a way to attract students and to involve students in things so that their education becomes complete. And so it was one of those things that, while, as I say, it was difficult at times, it worked out very well. I remember one faculty member in a department meeting that when I was proposing to establish a course in ichthyology, study of fish,
Right.
and there was opposition from less than half of the faculty, but it was close. And one of the faculty members got up and said, "What are we going to do next? Institute a course in earthworms?" And I've always remembered that. Later, the gentleman came by and apologized to me and said that he really didn't mean that. But in any event, there were some hurdles along the way, but it got easier and easier as time went on, and there was a move towards understanding what universities were and are, and research was more and more accepted.
Would it be fair to say that, I guess shortly after you came to Ball State, that you found a niche, and that, like other colleagues who we both know, John Diekman in actuarial science,
Yes.
Dave Costel in human performance, that you're one of those faculty members who had a lot of energy and a lot of goals, and found a place where you could do that at Ball State. So it didn't really make any difference if you were at Ball State or if you were at University X or University Y.
That's right. That is exactly right. And it was just, I'd had experience with models of programs, and knew the best things about programs and the worst things about programs, and always had those goals in mind. Along the way, establishing the Aquatic Biology and Fisheries option, and working with others at other universities to gain recognition of our program, giving papers, being accepted across the country, and you know, it was just all part of a grand plan to establish Ball State as important in this area, and that's come to be.
And yet, when you think of the great successful research programs, you usually think of programs that go on to the PhD.
Yes.
And that wasn't the case here. So one of the things that I've always seen as remarkable about your program is you were able to do this with outstanding undergraduates and master's students, and you didn't have this, what I call, major research university luxury of having a whole bunch of students around you to sort of do your bidding in your seminar.
Yeah. Well, that's right, and but we were able to pick up and play an important role with those master's students in terms of gaining recognition for the program and so on, and indeed, what another service that we have played, particularly in the last 20 years, is to send many of these master's students on to schools for PhD programs. And in fact, a person at the Michigan State University who was a department chair there in Fisheries and Wildlife and went on to be dean told me one day that they would take all of the students that we could send up there with master's degrees to work on PhD programs. So
high praise indeed.
Very high praise, and it was a wonderful thing to say and to hear.
Well, you must have had some opportunities over your long, terrific career at Ball State to go someplace else.
Oh, yeah.
But yet, like a lot of us, you stayed. And so my next question is, why did you stay here for your entire career?
Well, freedom to do what I wanted to do, what I love to do. Love to come to work every day. Something new would happen every day, and good people to work with, and as time went on, more and more support, and things could be built, and things that could be long-lasting and be of benefit to the people of the state of Indiana. I was very strong on that, and very strong on maintaining things that would be important for people within our state.
During your career, there were lots of changes here, and I'd like to have you reflect a little bit on the ways in which you feel Ball State changed, and perhaps also some ways in which we didn't change.
Well, ways in which we changed, I've already touched on that. That was the emphasis on research and publication, and this was an important role of the faculty members and getting students involved with research and research-oriented kinds of programs and experiences. Incredibly important for students, continues to be very important for students. Ways in which it might have changed for the better, one would have been better remuneration for services rendered. And of course, that's something that's always true. It seems like no matter where you are. But it seemed like that was difficult at Ball State, and you know, I never really ran into an awful lot of problems with doing the things that I wanted to do, and I sort of stayed out of the politics of things, and stayed focused on teaching and research and doing the best job I could there, and building programs and that sort of thing.
But let me try one change on you, because part of my thesis about Ball State history at the time that you've been here and I've been here is that in many ways Provost Jim Cook was kind of the revolutionary of the piece, that he came here for admittedly a short period of time in the 1980s and changed forever the manner in which we evaluate colleagues for the attainment of tenure, for promotion to associate, full professor, and for the introduction of merit market pay. As you reflect back on that, what I've called sea change in Ball State's history, did you see that as a positive change?
That was a very positive change, and I really respected Jim Cook. He's He really did some great things for this university in a very short period of time. Not everyone will agree with me on that. However, you're right. It did change the university, and hopefully forevermore, in terms of recognizing what the university should be all about. A combination of things.
Even though your department, as a department, was not, shall we say, terribly accepting of a lot of that, and stayed, and I think still has stayed, with a greater percentage of salary distributed across the board rather than putting it in merit and market.
Yep, that's right. I fought the battle for a number of years and finally realized that all I was doing is getting people upset, and so I decided it wasn't worth it, and I just let it go wherever it wanted to go. And but the university, the department is gaining more and more direction for the way it probably should be.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it was a good department when you came here. It's a terrific department today.
That's correct.
They've hired well, and even with, shall I say, their semi-socialistic way of distributing salary, but they still have a fair measure of productivity across the board.
Change is on the horizon.
So would it be fair, not to put words in your mouth, Tom, but would it be fair for me to say that you regard the changes, most of them anyway, that have occurred at Ball State, or that occurred at Ball State during your career as positive?
Very positive.
Rather than negative. Okay.
Very, very positive. Yeah. You know, I just Ball State has evolved and continues to evolve, and it's going to be and is a major player in education and research in the country.
Who were some of the people, both here and elsewhere, who had a special impact on your life as a teacher and scholar?
First, my major professor at the University of Missouri, Richard O. Anderson, was just a marvelous thinker, philosophizer, and just an incredible mentor. And I learned so much from him about how to deal with students and how to maintain quality within your program, and just all the things that a good super faculty member should be, that I tried to pattern myself after him a lot. However, his emphasis was almost totally on research, and I liked teaching as well, and so there have been a number of excellent teachers in my background that I've taken the best from and tried to take the best from and make the most of it. There was a professor at the University of Missouri who taught a course in the veterinary school that was just, I think, one of the most outstanding professors that I ever had. Very difficult course, but a year-long course, but excellent teacher. And there have been others here at Ball State that have given me good ideas. One of the most recent things that occurred was the advent of PowerPoint and the use of PowerPoint in teaching, and how that improves things when you master that and can apply it. Things move along a lot better. Students learn more easily. It's easier to keep their attention and so on. But the computer was a really big thing, and I always worked hard at trying to keep up with the computer developments in the computer.
Did you teach yourself that?
Yep. Taught myself that. In fact, I had the very first computer that our department ever had.
Okay. So even though Ball State offered all these classes and things like that for people to use computers, that I find you're more typical than one might think of someone who said, this is just something that can really enhance my teaching.
Exactly.
And I'm going to learn how to do this.
That's right.
And if they offer classes, that's fine and dandy, but I'll find some way to do it.
Well, that's right. And I don't mean to say that I never took a class,
Right.
because I did, but for the most part, especially early on, it was all self-taught, and even later on, why it's just a matter of self-teaching, I think, with the use of the computer in teaching. So,
what have been some of your special areas of involvement, both in the university or in the or even on the state or regional or national level?
Well, one of the very special areas of involvement was the American Fisheries Society. I was very active in the American Fisheries Society, presented many papers to peers at meetings that they would sponsor or co-sponsor, take students to them. That was very important, exposing them to the rigors of peer review. And the American Fisheries Society was great. Because of the American Fisheries Society and my profound support of that organization, I was able, with another couple of individuals, to establish the Indiana chapter of the American Fisheries Society. I served as the second president there, and the first technical session that was ever held was held here at Ball State for that organization. But then involvement in a number of things that they do, such as editorial review and serving in editorships and that sort of thing with that organization for the transactions of the American Fisheries Society and the North American Journal of Fisheries Management. I would say the American Fisheries Society was a really big thing for me.
What's your perspective on the role of the faculty at Ball State?
The role of the faculty.
Yeah.
Well, the role of the faculty is to make the most of what you have. Never give up. Work towards excellence as best you can. If things aren't the way you want to have them, then you need to push gently and try to get things changed if you can, but within a normal range of interaction that you can have with individuals and so on. Keep your nose clean and do the best job that you can.
Do you think that the faculty have had, I guess I'd call it, an appropriate amount of input over the years that you were here into decision-making at the university and into the governance system, which I now gather is about to be changed once again?
Yeah. I think that when I first came here that the faculty were extremely strong in decision making, and I think that over time that has eroded to some degree. Some people think more of a degree than others, but if faculty members are doing their job, then they really shouldn't be running the university. We need to have competent administrators that do the things that have to be done on that side of the fence, and you just have to have faith in people and support them. And I have never really seen a big problem there. Some people perceive a big problem, but I have never perceived a big problem there.
How do you view the relationship between what's often called town and gown, between the community and the university?
There is something there, but I think that especially in the last several presidencies, that there's been more and more emphasis on trying to erode that town and gown situation that exists out there that's perceived by people. And I think it's there have been inroads and there have been changes, and the university is definitely a place where if the people are interested in bettering themselves and creating a better life for themselves, if with the university here as a resource, it's an incredible resource for the city. Thank God we have Ball State in Muncie, Indiana.
You don't want to think what Muncie would be like without it.
That's right.
As one of my students once said, it would be like Kokomo, which probably wouldn't please the people that are part of the IU branch at Kokomo.
But I was pleased to see that our new president says that that's one of the things that they really need to work on, and I would agree, especially in this day and age. It's more important than ever.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that in the last decade, probably, there's been more emphasis. The latter part of John Wooden's presidency, the shorter presidency of Blaine Brownell, and now Dr. Gora. I think that they're all people who realize that the university has to become more aware of being a service provider writ large within the Muncie communities.
Yeah, that's true.
Any final thoughts or reflections? Anything else that you'd like to add?
No, it was a great run for me. I don't know where the 32 years went. It was, as I said before, it was the best job that anyone could ever have, and I was able to do what I wanted to do, and had a lot of support along the way, and it was over before I could realize it even.
Well, I think you also had the luxury of passing the torch, if you will, to someone like Tom Lauer.
Oh my, that was so wonderful, and I have to give a much praise to the department for recognizing the importance of getting just the right person to direct the Aquatic Biology and Fisheries Center. The connections that Tom Lauer brought were wonderful. His depth of knowledge in the field was wonderful, and he's continuing and extending the things we were able to achieve, and so the program and the center are in good hands.
Yeah. And that, as you well know, in academia, that doesn't always have to happen.
That's right.
That way. And I think that oftentimes when people have been as successful in establishing something of great importance as you were, that you at least would like to think that the university would be smart enough to try to continue that momentum.
Yeah.
And I think with Tom and colleagues over there, the university is very much aware of what you've done, and there's a lot of interest. I think certainly that was a case of, on my part, and I think also in the case of the deans, John Stone, and I'd like to think now Dean Marciotto, that what you began needs to continue and to be one of Ball State's premier programs.
Yeah, I agree, Warren, and I have to also say that I have a debt of gratitude to you because of your support over the years, and you know, you don't achieve the kinds of things that I was able to do alone. You have to have the support of others, and I recall that you said that one of the easiest ways to further programs at the university is to support your best programs, and I thank you for that support over the years.
My great pleasure, but I sometimes wonder, because of my long relationship with you and now with Tom, if I had started fly fishing when I was 15 years old, if I would have had that much interest in it. I know Jim Cook had a lot of interest in the program, and a lot of other people did as well, just because it was a terrific program. But in my case, as you are well aware, it was really a quite personal thing. So I was really very, very happy to do that. Anything else you'd like to add? Any final reflections?
Really not. Thank you for the opportunity to come and visit with you about this and so on. And all I can say is go Ball State.
I appreciate it.
Ball State is a great place to work. Muncie was a good place to live and raise a family. I can't say too much about it.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. I mean, that certainly was my experience here. I think people like us and lots of our colleagues, obviously not all, but certainly a fair number of them, had lots of opportunities to do the things they wanted to do. One last question. I want to see if you can answer this off the top of your head. Could you tell me in a kind of ballpark figure fashion how much grant money you brought to Ball State over your career?
Actually, I can.
Oh, you can?
$2.8 million.
Oh, okay. I was thinking about that last night because at some point, either one of your colleagues, or it might have been somebody in Jim Pyle's office, said that at a particular point in history, that you had all the grant money that was available to study perch.
That's
the
right.
Great Lakes. Is that true?
That's right. In Indiana waters of Lake Michigan, that's right.
That's right. Okay,
That's
well.
right. So, the Department of Natural Resources was always happy with what we did, and we did what they wanted us to do, and we did the best job we could. We got our reports in on time. We did anything that they wanted us to do, and we just have continued to receive wonderful support from those people. I think that anyone can establish a research program if they are wise enough to find the people out there that are interested in supporting the kind of research that they're doing, and then working with those people, and don't work against them, work with them, because that was something that I learned early on. Is if you're going after research support, that you have to do what other people want you to do, and so if you can do that, why, you'll be successful.
Yeah, it's nice to have your own ideas, but you're not
Yes.
you might not get anybody to support your ideas.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, thank you very, very much for participating in my project.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.